Hi folks. So I'm going to go and paint some flowers in the garden today. The weather forecast's not that great. It's a bit mixed. It's supposed to brighten up later, but the morning, a bit changeable. So there's a chance of rain. I've got my big umbrella. I don't want to go too far. I'm going to paint some roses in the garden, and I'm going to use watercolour. So let's see how it goes. I've set up the easel in the garden in front of the subject, and I'm using £140 Winsor & Newton cold press watercolour paper. I pre-stretched the paper with gum strip, and then I've added some blue masking tape around the edge to give it a nice clean finish. I took a little while to draw in the main two blooms, and that helped me to see where the folds and petals and shadows were going to be. I want the blooms to remain in focus, or to be more focused than the rest of the piece, and so I've left them white and wet the paper around them, taking care to delineate the edges reasonably well. So now I've pre-wet those areas, leaving the blooms white. I can drop paint onto the wetness and it will follow the water. It will go where the water is, and unless I drop some on the white areas, it will avoid that. It will spread around those areas. And now I'm adding in some red. I'm just basically trying to build up the background in an interesting way, an abstract way. My aim here is to create an impressionistic background by exploiting the wet in wet watercolour technique. I'm using Winsor & Newton Artists watercolours. As you can see, I've got pans there, but I'm using tubes as well, and I'll refresh my pans with the tubes as I go. I started with a couple of yellows and then bled some reds into them. These harmonise quite well and bleed together nicely, and they don't turn to mud, so they'll look quite clean and nice as a nice underpainting basis for the foliage that'll come later. I'd only been set up about 5 minutes and it started to rain, but luckily I had a huge fishing umbrella which I was able to hold with my left hand as I worked on with the right. It's not actually raining now, as you as you can see, and there's the subject. In fact, the sun kept coming out, the wind kept blowing. I started adding some blues as well, just to suggest some cooler tones, and also to get some of the foliage started, and dropping more bits of paint on here and there. This red's pretty much straight out of the tube, touching the brush on the pigment as I squeeze it out. Here's a time lapse reviewing what we've covered already, but from a different angle. You can see me altering the tilt of the board occasionally to allow the paint to run or to pool in different areas, and controlling that to a certain extent. re-wetting some spots now and lifting out bits of paint to create a bit of variety within some of the areas that have become a bit too flat. I'm going in, building up these darks with a mixture of Prussian blue and burnt umber to start introducing some of the shades and getting a sense of the tonal range, which will develop as I go along, obviously. If you're wondering what the other piece of paper on the board is for, it's actually another piece of stretched paper, and that's covered up with some cheap typing paper just to keep it clean. It's nice to have another piece of paper as backup if the first one goes wrong. Starting to drop in a few of the greens now and building up the actual foliage and the impression of the foliage, and that's where the underpainting helps, because the underpainting shows through the foliage and it gives that impression, but it's not just a flat green, it's more of an interesting range of colours. With watercolour, I like to think in terms of the paint. What can it do for you? How can it work for me? It just helps to have that in mind when you're trying to create an image. Start to wet the main bloom now, and now I can drop in the pinks, build them up gradually. So there's some wetting where it's damp rather than really wet, so that when, as you can see, I apply the pinks, they do spread gradually but more or less stay where they are. I had a bit of a battery change with the camera there, which meant I didn't cover everything, and I've built up the reds a lot more and added a lot more darks, and I'm in danger of overworking the piece here, so I've got to be very careful now. So here we go, reviewing the last few stages in a time lapse, and you'll see the roses blooms being completed, although really they weren't completed because I couldn't live with the way I'd painted them and actually began to wipe them out subsequent to this piece of film and rework them in the studio, which you'll see in a moment. But this is as much as I kind of did outside, and these are the closing stages of what I actually did on the spot before I took it indoors. Back in the studio, I had a bit of an assessment on how things had gone, and I wasn't happy with the way that flowers were looking. I tried to lift out some of the paint to bring back the highlights, but I'd gone too far and the paper was too stained. So I re-wet the flower, wiped away the excess paint, redrew it in gouache, and then I worked over that, applying the lights and then working towards the dark till I'd completed the bloom. I worked on a few more other areas, and then here I am removing the tape to leave a nice crisp edge. And here's the finished item. Watercolour is an exciting and challenging medium. Things don't always go as you plan. You've just got to persevere and keep practicing. You'll win some and you'll lose some. I've worked on my painting a bit with gouache, as I said in the film, and that was a good way of saving it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I'll try and make more videos soon. Bye for now.